welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. I'm Brad Eli, here with my two co-hosts, Simon Rave, Christine Niles. And gracing us today with his wits and wisdom, Kyle Copey. Hi, Kyle.
Brad, I'm lacking in both of those categories, but thanks for having me.
We'll ump your game here today. A pro-abortion college student in Bowling Green, Ohio, has been charged with a misdemeanor for vandalizing a pro-life crisis pregnancy center. The student, Whitney Durant, also goes by the name of Soren Monroe. She studies at Bowling Green State University. Monroe is accused of spray painting several slogans on the building of Bowling Green Pregnancy Center, also called Her Choice. Their graffiti included calling the pregnancy center a fake clinic and referencing the pro-abort terror group Jane's Revenge. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Ohio announced the misdemeanor charge last week in connection to the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. That measure, also called the FACE Act, was signed into law by President Bill Clinton in 1994. It prohibits behavior, quote, intended to injure, intimidate, or interfere with the right to seek, obtain, or provide reproductive health services, end quote. Interestingly enough, the FACE Act was meant to go against pro-life activists and protect abortion mills. The use of it to protect a pro-life facility against vandalism is certainly interesting. The pro-life pregnancy center is located near the campus of Bowling Green State University. On Friday, Monroe pleaded not guilty to the charge. Well, it's kind of refreshing, actually. The two-edged sword is actually cutting the second way. I mean, that's kind of a first. I haven't been reporting or heard much reporting on that type of a thing. So let's take back to Houck when he was Mark Houck, who we talked about there. He was used, the FACE Act was used against him. It was a little bit different, though. It wasn't just, charged with, you plead innocent, and you go about your way, and we'll worry about it in court later on. October 2021, as we know, Houck, who's a Catholic father, pro-life speaker, he was prayerfully protesting outside of an abortion mill. And Bruce Love, who was an abortion pro-abort escort, he was yelling obscenities and getting in the face of his young son, who's 12 years old at the time. And he kept doing this week after week after week, and he got really close into his guy's face, yelling all sorts of really nasty stuff. And Houck pushed him back. Well, of course, Love fell, and he sued, and, well, a year later in the summer, it got thrown out of court, lower court. It was, dismissed from lower court. Well, Garland, the weaponized DOJ under Biden, actually picked up that trail in the fall, made a federal indictment against Houck, and raided their house with their 7 kids in terror at 7:05 a.m. in the morning. Guns drawn, 12, I think the Ryan Maria's wife actually said there was a SWAT team, 24 officers involved, dozens of vehicles out there. They had their guns on them and everywhere all over the place. And that's a little bit different after already having this case tried in court, thrown out of court, happened, a year before that. There's a little bit of injustice, or a little bit of despair. The balance isn't there. Justice isn't really being blind here in the way it was administered. So then roll fast forward. Okay, he's taken into custody, and January 30th of this year, 12 jurors. It took them 1 hour to say not guilty. So really it wasn't too strong of a case against him. So really flagrant. And it wasn't just against him, a whole bunch of other this has been going on. We'll bring it all open into the bigger discussion.
And that's really a case where the Biden's DOJ really overplayed its hand, because there was so much outrage and backlash from the public because of what Garland did. I mean, obviously, what he did was outrageous. It was outrageous, an excessive use of force against a pro-life father who posed no threat whatsoever of any sort of violence. I mean, that's all he ever did, was just he pushed this guy out of the face of his son. And we have to remind people what this pro-abortion person was doing, yelling like that in the face of this little boy. That's actually illegal. That's not free speech. That's considered assault, because you're verbally, that is not allowed by law. You can't just get in someone's face, start screaming in their face. That is considered a verbal assault. But anyway, Garland had to sit before a Senate committee where he was viciously. He was grilled, and I'm glad he was grilled. You know, by Senator Hawley and all these other people, basically saying this was absolutely outrageous. How do you justify doing this? And what about all the pro-aborts who've been attacking and destroying pro-life clinics? Where are the prosecutions for these people? He said, well, it's hard to find them because they do it at night, and we're just having a hard time finding them.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think at the time, I did comment on Twitter that I would buy Merrick Garland a set of night vision goggles to do that. What did he offer as justification for the method used in the arrest of Houck?
It was always, like, well, I can't comment on, right? Wasn't it just?
I don't remember anything. And see, this becomes the interesting thing, that if you want to come along and say, look, you've got this guy who did commit assault against another person. He pushed another person away. That is a physical interaction. If you want to say we're going to go and we're going to actually take this and we're going to have this guy arrested and we're going to prosecute him and so forth, there are certain protocols that you would kind of want to follow. Now, if the man is dangerous, if you think that he has, a large number of guns in his home and that he may engage in some sort of, violent resistance, you're going to get some kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde shootout or something if you just go knock on the door at this point. But I don't believe there was a single shred of evidence to suggest that that was going to be the case. He wasn't going to, disappear into a shootout to do this kind of thing. You would, obviously, if you're going to go arrest somebody, you go arrest them. There are various ways to do it. Usually, you would go and you would just arrest somebody with, one or two officers in a police car. They would go do that. They would take the person away. This does not look good for the DOJ, because suddenly you're deploying a dozen officers behind guns. You're deploying vehicles. You're deploying hard shell body armor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I really would want to know, what did the DOJ, what did whoever signed off on that massive amount of manpower, what did they think they were going to get? How did they think that was going to play out? Did they really think that anyone was going to be, oh yeah, this is how you should treat this person? Even your average pro-abortion person is going to go, that's too far. Exactly. It's like, this isn't, I'm not too worried about like the weaponized DOJ. They just all appear to be morons.
Well, not all, because some of those guys, I believe, are acting under false information. What was reported at the time of the scene is that the wife actually got her pluck up and said, where's the warrant? Where's the arrest warrant? I want to see the warrant. And they were screaming, well, we can do this. We don't have to show you a warrant. Well, they finally went and got the warrant. And she got to read the first page of it. And then the warrant sometimes gets passed around to some of the other officers who are working there. And right after her husband was arrested so brutally and taken out to the car, one of the vehicles, and then all of a sudden, the shame just seemed to start appearing on some of these faces. Like, oh my gosh, what did we? This is all we have. There's nothing going on. We just did this. So what they were probably told, yes, there is a few people who are, compartmentalizing the information. And I'm not telling you guys, we got this, a big case. Look sharp, top of your game. We're going in, and things could get heated. Whatever, look live, and that's the pretense they're going in on. They didn't go all through there. They don't know the whole case. They just said, show up and arrest this guy.
Yeah, I mean, Houck even recounts that he witnessed that. When they showed up to his house, he witnessed sort of the change in countenance on some of these men as they realized, what they were being sort of coerced to do. I mean, taken for granted, law enforcement officers are doing a job. Many of them don't have all the information behind a particular operation or whatever. They're just following orders. But once they're given that information, he saw many of those officers there, that they just started to hang their head and say, we're kind of sorry for doing this. When Houck was being taken into custody, being driven down to, they took him in. He actually struck up sort of a friendship with the people that were taking him in. It was really, you don't want to blame all the officers that were involved in this. By no means do you want to do that. You want to blame, obviously going up higher in terms of the hierarchy, the DOJ, the AG, but you also want to blame the lead investigator on this case because he had that information, answering Simon's question of, okay, did they do their due diligence? Did they think this guy was a major threat, like he was going to come out with an AK or something? They knew that he wasn't. They knew that he had been doing pro-life counseling. He does this 8 hours a week. There's been no violent incidents. They've had no problems with him thus far. They knew, he wasn't a threat, and they did their due diligence. They just didn't tell the rest of the team. The lead FBI investigator kept that information to himself, made it seem like, yeah, we need to go in there with 20 plus officers, like it's Osama bin Laden or something like that. Houck was actually willing to turn himself in. People forget this, but he was working with his attorneys, talking to the FBI, saying like, hey, if you're going to arrest me, okay, I will come down and turn myself in if that's what you want me to do. But no, it's got to be some surprise attack where his kids are traumatized now. They're going through counseling, especially the younger ones. It's like, how do they process that? How do they not see any sort of law enforcement agency as like the bad guy now because they raided our house at 0 dark 30?
Yeah, at the end of the day, the buck stops with Garland. That's why he was the one who was grilled on Capitol Hill. And remember, this is the same guy who is approving of the DHS using a far-right domestic terrorism manual that includes among its profiles, hypothetical profiles, a pro-life middle-aged mom who drives a minivan and attends religious services. That's literally the profile of a hypothetical far-right domestic terrorist. I couldn't believe it when I read this. I thought, is this a parody? Yeah. Is this The Onion? And it's not. It really is in the DHS manual for far-right terrorism, domestic terrorism. A pro-life mother in her middle ages who drives a minivan, takes her kids to sports, and attends many religious services and is very concerned about the welfare of the unborn.
Just to let you know, Christine Niles sold her minivan, drives a car now, so she no longer qualifies for that. Right. Has to check all the boxes.
I still have my minivan, so.
Barely qualifies as middle-aged, though, I think. But I think, to your point, Kyle, talking about the, saying, okay, you've got to put this on the lead investigator. I think that certainly, absolutely, yes, a good law enforcement officer, you've got a guy who says, okay, throw on the hard shell armor, go out behind your gun, go see Newark over a shotgun barrel, as they say. Okay, is he going to be asking a ton of questions? No, he's not, because it's like, fine, I'm there to be a steady hand and a sure shot and deal with this stuff. But moving forward, I think this needs to be for any law enforcement official out there. It's like, you have got to understand, the people who are watching this, if you're in law enforcement, you've got to understand that you may be called on to do this kind of stuff. And now it becomes a question of due diligence for you to be saying, okay, Cap, what are we doing here? Really? What is this? Because this has happened previously. There's been multiple of these cases where people have been, where they've sent SWAT teams, where they've sent this sort of stuff. It's like, guys, until you have proven that you are actually like some sort of reliable guy and you're not going to send me on some sort of awful thing that could go horribly wrong. How many times do we hear the case of, that somebody panics or somebody, isn't clear what's going on. It's dark. It's uncertain, and somebody gets shot. Somebody gets injured. Somebody ends up in a pine box. I think law enforcement officers now have a responsibility to actually ask their superiors, okay, you really need to explain this to me. You really need to explain this to me, because I do not want to be, the next face on the news saying, oh, and he shot this innocent person when it wasn't my fault.
It's really interesting, too, that they're actually using the FACE Act to prosecute a pro-abortion person, because originally the FACE Act was passed under Bill Clinton, Democrat, pro-abort, and it was in response to so-called, I don't trust their statistics on this, but they claim there was this skyrocketing, this surge in violence, pro-life violence against abortion mills. So Chuck Schumer, he was sponsor of the bill, and so they passed this statute prohibiting people from interfering with abortion mills. And in fact, it addresses 3 different things: the use of physical force, threat of physical force, physical obstruction to intentionally injure, intimidate, interfere with any person obtaining an abortion. That's 1. 2, the use of physical force, etc., to intimidate, interfere with a person exercising their First Amendment right to religious freedom at a place of religious worship. Okay, that's 2. 3, the intentional damage or destruction of a reproductive health care facility or place of worship. So this pro-abort activist is being prosecuted under that 3rd clause, intentional damage or destruction of a reproductive health care facility. What's really interesting is that originally was supposed to encompass just abortion mills, but hey, pro-life clinics also offer reproductive health care.
Reproductive health care services.
So this is why this person's being prosecuted under that. Now, is he going to be found guilty? Yeah, he's going to be found guilty, because vandalism is specifically one of those things that's prohibited under the FACE Act. And I guess the big question is, will the pro-life clinic be considered a reproductive health care facility under this statute? I mean, technically it would be, because it does offer.
Yeah, because of course reproductive health care has been used as a euphemism repeatedly to refer to abortion. That's what it's been used to refer to. But of course, I'm not sure the law really deals in euphemisms. The law deals in specifics, and the law deals in terms of art, but I don't think that reproductive health care is really a legal term of art specifically meaning abortion. I think that's just how they get it in. So at which point, yeah, this is clearly reproductive health care in that they are offering, all of that sort of stuff. They're just offering, obviously, well, would you actually like to reproduce as opposed to murder your child? So we can go there. I'm just kind of intrigued. This is similar to what you and I, though, Christine, have discussed about the hate crimes issue. Okay, so you've got the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, FACE, as it's known. There must be a whole department in Congress who comes up with acronyms for these things. I want that job. It's probably like $120,000 a year. They probably don't have to do anything except come up with acronyms that you can probably do with ChatGPT these days. I would love that job. That would be a great job. That's a great job to retire. So if there's any congressman out there and they're looking for somebody, I will definitely take you up on that one. But the FACE Act is saying, you may not vandalize. Well, last time I looked, vandalism's still a crime anyway. Why do you have to be charged when you go and you spray paint something, or you damage facilities, you smash a window, you pour paint all over the place or whatever? When you vandalize a location, why do I have to go to some specific act that says, oh, you're not allowed to damage this kind of location? Had you done it next door, had you done it to Mrs. Miggins' pie shop next door, which is not for reproductive health, we'd be fine. Sorry, Mrs. Miggins, you're out of luck. Oh, you did it to her choice, the healthcare facility? Oh, yeah. No, you see, that, again, it's ridiculous. Why is this person isn't just being charged with vandalism?
The reason is because at the time that this was passed, abortion was a constitutionally protected right. Okay, so it was held to a higher level, just like religious worship, religious freedom. That is a constitutionally protected right. And so these are special rights that are being protected by this statute. Well, it's no longer a constitutionally protected right? With Dobbs v. Jackson, it is no longer in the Constitution. So the question is, really, yeah. I mean, why should we treat this in a special way anymore? Back then, there was justification for it, but it's not a constitutionally protected right anymore, so it should not have special status anymore.
Yeah.
When Garland was being grilled by Holly and others, they also brought up the numbers that all the churches have been vandalized, all of the pro-life centers that have been vandalized. I think, Simon, you have some numbers.
I have some numbers, and I don't know how accurate they are because I keep seeing different numbers from different places, but it is a lot. So this is from the Committee for Religious Liberty of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, so obviously they're there. And they're saying that at least 624 incidents have occurred across 43 states in the District of Columbia.
Churches and pro-life centers?
This is just Catholic churches, and this is since May 2020. Because you remember, of course, there was May 2020.
All that violence started.
Yeah, it was because obviously this was shortly after the lockdown, and people were getting kind of antsy, and then shortly after that, all of that violence and everything started happening there. The Floyd thing. Anyway, and obviously there's been a lot of violence that has happened more recently after the Dobbs decision, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. They're looking at these examples of things like arson, statues being beheaded and spashed, painted, and vandalism, spray painting, all this sort of stuff, including, this is most interesting, that many of these things have been defaced specifically with swastikas, that people have actually specifically used swastikas to deface them. Now, obviously, as we know, the swastika is used by the Nazis most famously, and it has become kind of the shorthand for Nazism to do that. Nazis incredibly anti-Catholic. Many Catholic priests were persecuted by the Nazis during the Third Reich. But what is actually happening in many cases is these swastikas are being used by left-wingers, and they are using them kind of almost this false flag kind of idea. They're going to try to give the impression that something is being done by a right-winger, and the idea is the right-winger will use the swastika there. But there are as well anti-Catholic language has been done, and also burning of American flags. So there's been this kind of wholesale kind of anti-Americanism there as well.
You talked about before about the statues like Becerra, which is American and Catholic.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah, and these statues, of course, were destroyed. In many cases, these statues were destroyed, and then what happened is these statues, in some cases, were in public spaces, such as the Becerra statues and these things. They were destroyed, they were torn down, and then the local government said, well, let's we're not going to repair it, or we're going to completely remove it. Now it's been damaged because, you know, colonialism, I think, is some sort of excuse. One of the interesting things, though, is to determine if a thing is a false flag operation with a swastika. It's people can't draw a swastika. It's not a thing that actually the left can draw. So you can always tell that this is a false flag operation because they have done a badly formed swastika.
You would think that in the leftist art classes, in the leftist-run public school systems, they would actually be teaching that, how to draw a correct swastika, but you know, maybe that's not in their curriculum yet. But yeah, I wanted to touch on that the reproductive services thing. You know, it's kind of ironic, and it's almost like a good irony here that now that you know, crisis pregnancy centers, sometimes they're called pregnancy resource centers, refers to the same place. Now that those are actually being recognized now, it's actually, you know, in the legislation there, and people don't know this, but those are actual you know, places where women can get help, as Simon said, and actually go through with the reproduction. Because how are you going to call these, you know, clinics? You know, we have these pro-aborts spray painting fake clinic on the crisis pregnancy centers, when the irony is that the abortion mills, because they're not clinics, they're mills, those places are the fake clinic because they're actually killing people. What we're trying to do at the crisis pregnancy centers is actually save lives. So you know, it's ironic. You know, one pro-lifer said that, you know, attacking the crisis pregnancy centers in the name of supporting women is also an irony, because I mean, what are you doing? You're going to help a woman kill her child? How is that supporting women? And also, too, just one more thing last on Mark Houck. It's interesting that they tried to use the FACE Act against him, just given his case, because he was obviously not trying to blockade one of these abortion mills. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't out there attacking. I know he used physical force, but he wasn't outright attacking an escort to try to prevent a woman from going into a clinic. He wasn't out there getting in someone's face screaming obscenities. That's what this alleged victim was doing. He wasn't doing any of that stuff. He was actually, I think, this alleged victim, actually the perpetrator, who was screaming obscenities at his then 12-year-old son. This guy followed the Houcks off the property. It seemed like he wasn't even in the vicinity at the time, and that's when the push occurred. They were, you know, the Houcks were actually trying to get away from this situation, and they were followed by this guy. And of course, you know, the jury saw that. That's why the verdict came back in his favor so quickly.
Well, plus Houck had a history of peaceful protesting, going there to pray, wasn't blockading anyone. He was there setting a pattern of action repeatedly, week after week after week. So there was none of that, like you say, trying to blockade anything. Only when this particular incident was escalated by Love, his last name's Love, is when this took place. And I think to put everything in a wider perspective here, after Biden took office in January 2021, we've really seen I don't think it's, you know, too beyond the pale to say weaponization of the DOJ, of the FBI. And in case in points, when you start seeing the parents, concerned parents at these school board meetings, and, you know, they're being, you know, letters are going back and forth with the DOJ saying, well, these are, you know, domestic terrorists. Really? Like you were talking about, if you have a van and you're a, you know, pro-life mom and this type of thing. Well, these parents who are at these school board meetings who are actually concerned about their daughter having to go share a bathroom with a guy, or be in sports against men, or you know, the whole transgender thing. Why aren't you telling me that my child, you know, is being groomed for transgenderism, or for you know, talking about having an abortion or something? I should know those things as a parent, and to be concerned about that type of stuff, especially once after the whole COVID lockdowns, when the parents started to understand more what was being taught in the classrooms, because they were doing that at-home learning. And they're like, what? They're teaching all this? You know, the anti-Catholic curriculums and all this type of stuff happening. So they're being labeled as domestic terrorists. And then you take another step forward, not too long ago, was it like 6 months ago? I think I'm losing track of time here, when the FBI, that field document comes out, and the rad-trad, Catholic contingent
Church
is
Militant
being,
was in there.
and Church Militant had a whole page donated to Church Militant. We were on the page.
We were on that.
Although people saying we weren't on there.
Yeah.
Well,
And then, but saying because we were not on it, therefore we must have colluded with the FBI against other red.
Again, I come back to my earlier comment. People are not evil; they're just morons. No, what there was a document that was like, I don't know, a dozen pages or something, and then there was like the appendix at the end that was like a list of organizations, and we were not on that list. But this appendix was like separate to the report. We were in the report, and what everyone did is nobody read the report because too long didn't read, and I was like, dude, it's like 12 pages and half of it is redacted. It's like 5 minutes to read. It really is. It's government work. It's written at a 5th grade level, for the love of. Anyway.
Well, I had an exchange with a guy where he said, maybe Church Militant was colluded with the FBI because they're not in this. And I literally took the screenshot. Yeah. I said, here we are. Waiting for him to apologize, and he's like, well, they're kind of neutral towards you guys, so maybe. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay, blocked.
Well, I think I actually accused that guy because he wasn't named. I accused him of being linked with the feds because I just don't play. But that of course, I mean, I think certainly there's that whole ridiculous situation there with that. But when you actually look at this notion of talking about, obviously, domestic terrorist, okay, you think, okay, that's an unusual phrase, but it's essentially just the phrase that they use for anyone who they don't particularly like. Look, we remember when we did our CTAC, the Call to Action conference, back, what was it, last year? Gosh, how time flies. And we had Mark Randazza, a great First Amendment lawyer. He was our lawyer for the Baltimore case that we won. In your face, Baltimore. I'm going to keep reminding them of that. And he was talking about the danger of opening the can of worms, and he said of building these weapons that will be put in the hands of your enemy. And he was talking about the Patriot Act, and he was saying, well, the Patriot Act, and lots of right-wingers, lots of conservative people were kind of supporting the Patriot Act because it was seen to be this thing, and it was like, guys, this is where it started. This whole notion of calling people terrorists kind of started with the Patriot Act. And now the chickens have come home to roost, and it's there. That you've got to be very careful that once these weapons are forged, they can be used against you, which is now, of course, being seen with regard to the FACE Act. Personally, I feel that this Whitney girl, she should just have been prosecuted for vandalism. That's it. If you're going to vandalize, if you're going to make threats, prosecute you for vandalism, for making threats, for whatever. I do not want, like, sentencing enhancement. I don't want, specifically this thing, specifically that, because you know what? That is not equal justice. That's not equal justice. Again, this is like the whole hate crimes bill and this sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah. And once again, it's no longer a constitutionally protected right, so why should it get special, treatment anyway? But going back to what you were saying about Garland labeling these concerned mothers at school boards as domestic terrorists, one of the most egregious examples was in Loudoun County, Virginia, that a very, very controversial bathroom policy where they were allowing biological men into girls' bathrooms, and the parents were very upset about it. And the school board meetings did get raucous. The parents were loud, they were upset. And one of the fathers, and you can see this on video, he's actually tackled to the ground by guards, armed guards, because he started getting very raucous. And it turned out it's because the school board lied and claimed, no child has been harmed under this bathroom policy. Direct lie, because one so-called transgender girl, it was a boy, actually raped. He sexually assaulted a girl in the bathroom in one of the Loudoun County schools, and that was the father of the girl, and he was extremely upset, getting very loud, and yet he's the one being treated like the criminal.
I don't even think, just to dwell on that for a second, the father and your daughter's raped in one of those bathrooms because of this silly policy, not silly, but sinister policy, and then they're actually lying about it right there. I just can't imagine, how you would actually be able to keep your cool right there. And the fact that he's starting to lose his cool and then he's tackled down, then they're just using that as this showcase. These guys are, without even reporting all the facts on that. You got so many layers of wrong here with media.
I think kind of the first
and administrative parts of the government.
The first thing that I would go to with that one, though, is, did he just raise his voice? If he just raised his voice, if he just yelled, if he just shouted, if he just insulted people, there is no justification to physically tackle a man with armed guards. That's the whole point. First, guards, plural. There's one of him, and there's a bunch of you, and is he just raising his voice? Is he just very angry? Is he just screaming and shouting? So you physically tackle the guy? Secondly, you're armed. You know, there's this whole ridiculousness of like every single time we just put guns in places. It's like, why do you need guns at a school board meeting? Why do you need guns at a school board meeting? Just as a general rule. Why do you need any kind of
even guards? I've never heard of guards.
Exactly. Why do you need guards?
Armed guards at a school board meeting at all.
Because what you're doing is this is quite literally the weaponization, not of the DOJ. This is the weaponization of just various levels of government, and it has a chilling effect. This isn't about what this guy said. This is so that every single person who sees that goes, oh, you know what? Maybe I don't get sad anything because I don't want to get body slammed by some, you know, failed linebacker with a 9mm on his hip. And just the same way of Houck, okay, there could be the argument the lead investigator is all like, yeah, this isn't going to hold up in court. This isn't going to hold him in court. Garland's going to have to go and justify it to the Senate. I'm probably going to get censured or whatever. But ultimately, there's a chilling effect here because you know what? Everyone's slightly scared of a bunch of guys in hard shell armor coming, you know, behind, M16s. That's the whole point.
And I'd say, too, at the end of the day, Garland sits there for an hour or two or three, very uncomfortable, while Hawley and others are, you know, really grilling him. And he goes home. At the end of the day, he goes home, and nothing happens. And so that program you're left with, not knowing. And it wasn't just Houck. There was dozens of pro-lifers who were arrested in violent ways with police, in their homes and having to kneel and come out on their knees and all this type of stuff. This is not a one-off incident. So, yeah, it does have a chilling effect when you're involved with these things on pro-lifers at abortion clinics, these parents at the schools. This is where, you know, the babies are getting killed, and the babies who didn't get killed or living are actually being, you know, malformed with bad teaching. So it really is I hate to throw this back, but, you know, where are the bishops on this? Why aren't they out there protesting all the injustice with all this? They make us a little statement about, well, yeah, they shouldn't be talking about the trad Catholics or whatever, but really, there's not a lot of leadership there. And then the Catholics who are in charge, Biden and these crazies, that are in charge of these, you know, it's on their watch, down from then, started up after they took power. You know, and they're not being called to task on this by any means. So there's something really wrong with the Catholic leadership in America, in the government, and the Catholic leadership in this country in regard to the churches. And when you only got leadership in church and state, and when both are wrong and both are lacking so much, you can't help but have an America that's actually spinning out of control in these specific areas: media, schools, law enforcement. It's not looking good for the home team right now.
Yeah, the weaponization of, you know, things like the federal government and different branches, arms of the federal government against conservatives is obviously very concerning. It's all a matter of intimidation, I think, because even if, you know, Houck wins, which he won, even if some others are vindicated, what kind of seed does that plant in the rest of pro-lifers' minds? Are they going to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't go out to this prayer rally? Hey, maybe I shouldn't go in front of this abortion mill? This is one of Houck's actually talking points that he's trying to tell people. He's like, you know, don't let what happened to me scare you into not taking action. He's actually going out there telling people this. And, you know, it's interesting once you follow all the breadcrumbs here, because it's like you have to ask the question of, you know, originally this didn't start out as a federal investigation against Houck. The feds took it upon themselves. That went out of their way.
After it was thrown out of lower court.
After it was thrown out of lower court. It was a criminal complaint at the local level. And then somehow, no one knows, magically this gets in the hands of the feds, and they put the full power of the federal government behind it. You know, so it's like, where is that investigation? People are calling for this. Houck has actually said, you know, he's working with the Thomas More Law Center to ask these types of questions and see if, you know, we can find out how this happened and maybe have some repercussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and false arrest and excessive force and all that. Why is it just, you know, poor George Floyd, you know, may he rest in peace, but there's a lot of excessive force being used out there that nobody's talking about.
And returning to what you said about the U.S. bishops, they've been notoriously milquetoast on the whole abortion, pro-life issue compared to how they are on illegal immigration. And this is one of the reasons why we're holding this conference on July 20th out in Washington, D.C., the Deposit of Faith conference. The coalition, about a dozen Catholic groups, are sponsoring this to call out the Catholic bishops, the USCCB specifically, for lobbying for really anti-American things. One of our speakers will be speaking about illegal immigration, specifically in relation to child sex trafficking, and the fact that because the bishops are facilitating an open border, they are facilitating child sex trafficking, whether intentionally or not. That's what they're doing, and we are calling for the government to defund the USCCB. Not all the bishops. We're talking specifically about the corporation USCCB, which, as you talked about, lobbies for many anti-American things.
One more anti-American thing that's making the rounds right now. Timothy Dolan, Cardinal Timothy Dolan in New York, and George Tobin in New Jersey, and Supich, Blaise Supich in Chicago, all saying, hey, you should turn in your guns, because you guys should just do that, and that would make America better. So law-abiding citizens, even though we're already defunding the police and already, getting rid of, not backing the blue, you all should just turn in your guns too. So that's against the Second Amendment. That's anti-American. That's actually saying, going against the founding fathers and what we hold dear, the ability, even their ability, the catechism, and the obligation at times. If you have someone who's depending on you, like a child depending on you, there's the obligation to defend that child. You might be pacifist according to yourself, but you don't have that right, according to the catechism, to do that with your children or those who are dependent upon you. So your obligation then to defend them. And you don't defend them when someone's coming at you with guns or lethal weapons. You don't just defend them by, wishing it away. So the fact that they're actually calling for 3 different cardinals in this country recently calling for law-abiding citizens to turn in their guns, their weapons, and hopefully we never have to use any weapons against anybody, but the idea that that they're actually using their platform to tell you to turn in your guns is really anti-American.
Well, I think it's anti-American in another way, and this is kind of an interesting thing, that the Second Amendment allows for the possession of weapons, firearms, guns, by private citizens. It allows for it. It is, as you say, it's part of the Constitution. It's part of the Bill of Rights, which kind of like is the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, really not amendments. They're like, guys, I get it that you were kind of busy in Philadelphia, but you really should have put those in originally. I mean, that's kind of what the Bill of Rights is. It's like, dudes, did you not think this? I get it. You put together a great document, but you could have made it just a little longer. But you've got that. Okay, it's a fundamental American right, and you can discuss, is this right or wrong to be in there? You can have all those discussions. But going and saying you should turn in your guns, you should turn in a thing that you legitimately possess, and you will still legitimately be able to possess it once you have turned it in. That's the key point. They're not coming and saying, hey, guys, let's have a movement to repeal the Second Amendment. They're not coming around, going around all the states and saying, let's have a convention of states, let's pass another amendment to repeal the Second, to adjust the Second. They're not doing that. They're just saying, look, I know that I can't actually change the rules. I can't change the law. I can't change this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to get you to give up something you own. That's your property that the bishops are telling you to give up. Set aside the fact that it's a gun. It belongs to you. You bought it, you paid for it, you went through all of the necessary requirements to get it in cases of where you actually have to have requirements to get the guns. You're licensed to do it and so forth. It belongs to you. That is not just a question of some sort of anti-Second Amendment issue. That's not just some sort of anti-self-defense issue. That's not just some sort of anti-hunting issue, some sort of anti-conservative issue. It's all of those things. It's a fundamentally anti-American issue because it's saying, I want you to give up your stuff that belongs to you. That's a strike at private property. Private property is like one of the very, very first, most foundational rights that the church itself should recognize. The church recognizes the value of private property. If anyone comes at you and says, oh, what's wrong with communism? What's wrong with socialism from a Catholic perspective? Private property is forbidden under communism. That's the entire notion of it. Private property is necessary in order for you to be charitable. if you don't own anything, you can't willingly say, behold, here is some of my largesse to somebody. You can't be charitable. Somebody coming along and taxing you and then taking that tax and giving it to the poor, giving it to the marginalized, that is not charity, that is taxation and government assistance. That is a key point. Private property is necessary for material love.
Yeah, they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and without a firearm in this day and age, when the sheriff in Milwaukee, as a black man, as a sheriff, said, you know what? We're only going to be there to take down the statistics after the crime happens. You need to, and he was on national networks, you need to go ahead and buy a firearm, use a firearm, defend your own home at the time when you need to, because we're not going to be able to respond in the time frame in which we're going to have to. So it's not, we can't take care of this, you have to take care of it over your own. We're just there to fill out the report when it's done. And so that particular private property is also tied into your your ability to preserve your life, and that makes it a higher grade status. And one other thing on this happened about a century ago with on our southern border with Mexico. And the Cristeros, it was actually the intervention of the Catholic Church that said, hey, Cristeros, you Catholic, law-abiding Spanish people, you need to lay down your weapons. And they did. And it didn't turn out so well for them. And they had, the Masons take over, communists take over, and all this take over. And it's just a terrible state down there, failed state right now in Mexico because of it. And they were actually winning the wars because back then it was equal force against equal force. Today, Biden, he was kind of chuckling about it. He says, today, I mean, in the last 6 months, he said, you need F-15s and nuclear weapons to defeat us. So, well, he's kind of right about that.
I just watched a film yesterday with my kids called The Night of the Hunter from 1955. Actually, a very good film. But it's about an itinerant preacher who is pretending to be a preacher, but he's actually a murderer. He goes around finding widows, vulnerable widows, and then he takes their money and then kills them. And so the plot is all about him. The husband is gone, and this husband has left $10,000 hidden somewhere. So this preacher marries the woman, and the little kids are the only ones who know where the money is buried. And so he gets rid of the mother. And then he's basically trying to find out from the kids. He threatens the kids. Kids run off. I don't want to give the whole film away, but at the end of it, let's just say it's actually quite good. It's good. It's a nail biter. It's a thriller. And so he's trying to find them. These little kids are now hiding out at kind of a lady's house who takes in orphans. And the preacher comes up to the house, and she sees right through him. She knows what he's all about. And so she runs into the home, and she comes out, and she's got a shotgun. And she points it right at him, and then he's like backing off, and then she shoots, and injures him, and so he runs off. But that was the only thing.
Gives away the story right there. You don't have to watch it.
You don't have to watch now.
Spoiler alert! Oh, too late.
There was more to it.
There's more to the story. There's more to the story than this widow woman shooting someone.
The whole point is that shotgun was the only thing protecting this lady and her children from this man, and in those cases, guns come in very handy because if all you has a knife and you're going up against a 200 guy with a knife, you're gonna die, okay? And so for people who are in situations like me or others, guns are absolutely necessary. What was really interesting is when I was purchasing my guns a couple years ago from this firearms dealer, he was talking to me. He said that he was amazed at the number of guns being sold during that time to people that you would never expect in a million years to buy them. He's saying like liberals, all sorts of people who originally were very anti-gun, but as soon as you had these riots breaking out and Antifa and everything, and the police not able to come help, he was like, I couldn't believe the number of guns that I was selling. And the ammunition too was completely sold out. You were on a wait list because they couldn't produce enough ammunition for everyone. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
On the subject of guns, I have another movie, which is another very good movie that people should watch. But on your notion of Biden saying, if you want to fight against the government, you're going to need an F-15 nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
So there is the excellent Nicolas Cage movie, Lord of War, which I would advise if you can watch it kind of with the swearing bleeped out, I would. I saw it first on a plane, and I saw the airplane cut, where they cut out all of the swearing and stuff. And actually, I think it's a better movie without the swearing. But the movie itself is a very good movie about an arms dealer played by Nicolas Cage. And there is an Interpol agent who is hunting him down. And the Interpol agent has a very wonderful phrase. He says, the true weapons of mass destruction are not the nuclear bombs. They stay in their silos and don't harm anyone. The true weapons of mass destruction are handguns and long arms, such as you are selling to these warlords and these criminals, because he's, that's essentially what he's doing. He's selling arms to people who can't legitimately buy arms, and that's very, very true. When you discuss the notion of saying if the government comes for you, they are not going to come for you with an F-15 and a nuclear bomb. They're going to come for you with people with rifles and small arms and those sort of things. And the government is not going to come for you. This is a key point. When the government wants to come for you, it will send law enforcement to come for you, and that will be the whole horrible experience that Houck had. It doesn't matter how many guns he'd had. He was not winning that situation if it was turning into a firefight. But the important thing is, as Christine says, when a criminal comes for you, it's him. He's hopped up high on some jungle mushroom or some rubbish like that, and he has got a gun, and you've got a gun, and you know what? If that's the decision that you want to make, we've had this discussion here, previously about the validity of having a gun. It's your choice if you want to have one. But absolutely, it becomes a very important thing, to your point, Brad, the defense of life and liberty. And one final quote from Admiral Yamamoto, who led the Japanese during World War II.
Studied in America, though.
Studied in America. This is why. He was like, invading America would be madness.
Yeah.
There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. This was one of the most militarized nations of the mid-20th century. This was the Japanese, and Admiral Yamamoto was like, I am not setting foot in California. I will quite happily bomb them. We will quite happily fight them on the sea, but I'm not setting foot in California because there's a rifle behind every blade of grass. So, I don't know. Maybe Biden's wrong.
Kyle?
I mean, it's very foolish for the bishops to call for this for several reasons. First of all, it's illogical. No red-blooded American conservative is going to turn in their guns willingly. It's just not going to happen. Pry them out of my cold, dead hands type of thing. I can see that being touted about. And it also wouldn't work on the level of, well, then even if, let's say, we were all willing to turn in our guns, who does that leave armed? The criminals who are not going to turn in their guns. So that's a whole thing there. But I do just want to push it back before we end here to our opening story, the Bowling Green story. To this alleged perpetrator, this Whitney Durant, who goes by some weird, gender-inclusive name or something like that. Durant is not new on the scene in Bowling Green. She actually has a history of harassing pro-lifers on the campus. The pro-life campus, or the campus of Bowling Green, rather, has a very robust pro-life program. They call themselves the Pro-Life Falcons. That's the mascot there. The administration lets these people run wild, not the pro-lifers, but the the pro-abort people. The administration has done nothing about people like Durant harassing pro-lifers, getting in their face, screaming obscenities, not only in person but online, doing cyberbullying, defamation, just straight up lying about people online, lying about pro-lifers. But speaking of those pro-lifers, good on them, because right after, within a couple hours after Durant allegedly spray painted the building with stupid phrases like abort God, nope, you can't do that. Within 2 hours, you had the pro-life group there scrubbing the walls, repainting the building and everything. Just speaks to the fact that, the pro-life movement is alive and well with Gen Z. They are the pro-life generation, as those signs conclude. So there is a lot of hope here.
Yeah, I think Durant's probably going to get found guilty of this, and then, or the FACE Act is hard to prove, but she'll probably be found guilty, get off with a slap on the wrist, if anything, maybe some community service at the end of it, and all be blowing away, where Houck had his whole life turned upside down and his kids traumatized after that, and many others. The fact, though, that the bishops, the government, and the media all want you to turn in your guns, it's kind of like, why is this triangle of collusion going on? That's the point. Not so much just the guns, but why is that triangle of collusion going on against an American person? And to say, well, wait a minute, you talked about the bishops turning in guns. Of course, the government's been trying to get you turning guns forever. What about the media, though? The media never reports on good guy with gun defending a bunch of people against bad guy with gun. We're here in the news, we hear about those stories, and we report on some of them. But the media, the mass media, will almost never, ever report on the large number of times when a good guy with a gun actually stopped a mass murder in process, or stopped it from happening, or nipped something in the bud, or defended their home against a killer, and all of this. And the second thing that goes on when you do use a gun, the thing that would keep me, I mean, there's a moral concern there of, you're going to send somebody into eternity not prepared to meet their maker. But you're also going to face a lawsuit. And that's a bad thing. Guy breaks into your home and he's shooting and you shoot him. Now all of a sudden you're going to go to a lawsuit, and you may spend years in a lawsuit, which you may or may not win. So it is a very difficult situation, no matter what. It's not just a matter of get a gun and you're going to be fine. There's a lot of other fallout from that too.
Just going back to what Kyle said about hope. Frankly, I never thought that I'd see Roe v. Wade overturned in my lifetime. So to me, that in itself is a miracle. Now, there was a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, a great deal of pushback when we had Dobbs v. Jackson. So you actually had, in the beginning, some conservatives, some pro-lifers, supposed pro-lifers, actually saying that they were not happy with Dobbs because, well, for various reasons, political reasons. But a recent poll actually showed that that's turning around, that a majority of Americans, 52% of Americans now support the fact that Dobbs overturned Roe v. Wade. And we have to remember something with all this pushback and all that. Roe v. Wade was on the book for 50 years, so people were conditioned over the course of 50 years to accept abortion as a right. It's going to take at least another 50 years to recondition people, to remind them that no, abortion is not a right. The right to life is fundamental. We have to protect the unborn. It's going to take a long time for a new generation to grow up under pro-life laws, which are being passed now under various states, and to kind of relearn and recondition ourselves to believe, yeah, this is actually wrong. This is murder, and it's not protected in the Constitution.
And that should have been a message coming from the pulpit for the last 50 years. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus exules filii Eve. A te suspiramus gementes effluentes in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos confete, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, o clemens, o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria.
Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.